Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard. If they're a benefit, it's not my problem.
I'm Rachel.
Deckard.
They were designed to copy human beings in every way.
How can it not know what it is?
Commerce is our goal here at Tyrell. More human than human is our motto.
Everybody, welcome to What the Flick. Christy, Matt, Alonzo. So Blade Runner 2049 opens this weekend, and we thought, hey, let's talk about ye old original Blade Runner, but which one? There are so many iterations floating around, although now we have the final cut, which presumably is the final cut.
Right, hence the name.
So I took a look at that last night, and you
yeah, I've watched it recently, and I think when we get to numbers, let's do.
Oh, we're doing no. Oh, I guess we have.
Oh,
maybe
we're
not.
gonna give a review to Blade Runner.
Yes,
Okay.
or
Well,
at least
we
gonna
did Star
discuss it.
Wars.
Okay,
Right.
so look, like there's a lot of people. We all know that this movie has this strained history of how it was released. It was originally released. It wasn't a huge hit.
Didn't it open the same day as ET?
May
In 1982.
It was the same summer in it.
Yeah,
but I thought it
so
might
was
be
the
same
Thing.
day.
I think the Thing and ET were that same summer too,
Yeah.
right? And people
And
were like-
Grease 2.
So this movie
And
is
Tron. It was a hell of a summer.
so. Any cut of this movie is visually dazzling, and that's consistent. But the different cuts of this movie have changed what the movie is about, right? And so the original way it was released, with the voiceover that was added later, that Ridley Scott hated, that Harrison Ford thought was a mistake, turns this into a simple noir story. It turns it into this simple, relatively simple noir story,
Detective
story that with robots that's set 40 years in the future rather than 40 years in the past. And sure, as a technical exercise, it works and it's kind of cool looking, and the production design in this is almost as influential as anything that we saw in the first Star Wars movie. That lived in dystopian used future, but still current and
I mean, Brazil
powered,
Brazil is after this movie.
right. The original movie with the narration kind of works, right? I mean, to the point that when you hear that, they wanted him. Yeah, this is a decent movie. The later cuts that start getting more philosophical really add to the film. And I had originally, like a lot of people, saw this on home video, and I talked about in, I think, our spoiler review, that when I saw this on the big screen for the first time, there were elements in the movie that I hadn't ever seen. And again, it's an argument for seeing things on a big screen whenever you can, because movies are shot, a lot of movies are shot to be seen.
And apparently also, according to the IMDb trivia page or whatever, where they talk about the various versions, part of what happens in the final cut is they sort of digitally brightened it a bit. So you could actually see things in the background that were sort of muddy before. Like now you can see there are dirty dishes in Deckard's apartment, that kind of thing.
Because it is perpetual nighttime, perpetual rainy nighttime.
Yeah, and
in
just
LA.
shadows with the light streaming through the windows, everybody's smoking.
So the biggest difference is in the original film, there's this voiceover that makes it a detective story. They cut out the dream sequence with the unicorn, and then they kind of tag on this happy ending driving through the countryside, and you think that
Into The Shining.
Right? And that Deckard and Rachel have escaped, and yay. Yeah. The work print that got released as the director's cut was something that got put out without Scott directly involved, and so he oversaw the final cut, and that's why it's called the final cut. If you pick that up, it's got all these various versions, and that puts in the unicorn dream sequence, and what's important, and takes out the voiceover. And the important thing about the unicorn dream sequence is that at the end of the film, when you see them leave Deckard's apartment and he finds the origami unicorn, it's a pretty big hint that Gant, Edward James Olmos' character, knows Deckard's dreams, knows his memories the way that Deckard knew Rachel's, because they've been implanted and Deckard's a replicant. And that's the version that I think is what the sequel is the sequel to. Not.
But Alonzo and I might not agree with that, which you'll know when you click on our spoiler review.
Right, for the new one, but don't click on it until you see the new one.
See the movie first, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did not see the first one in theaters. I think I caught it on home video too. I remember screening the '92, I guess with the work print version, whatever, or the European cut or whatever the fuck they were calling it, when I was in Dallas. Speaking of Dallas, did you ever go to the State Bar? in Fair
State
Park?
Bar in Fair Park. No.
Because they had the off-world colony blimp
neat.
above the bar.
Interesting.
Oh,
The
that's
guy
really
was a
cool.
huge fan of Blade Runner. He had bought it at some auction.
That's
Anyway,
funny.
that's neither here nor there.
I've never been there.
But yeah, so definitely I thought the taking out the narration made a huge difference because it's really clunky and excessive and unnecessary.
But you can see why stylistically they would choose to have that kind of voiceover
Sure, no,
to make it more of a noir.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
gives it a
sense.
Bogarty kind of thing, but
makes sense.
but it's so
also-
bad though. I mean, like
Right.
Ford is not engaged.
Yes,
But
that
it's
was
also
everything
there
out,
because
yeah.
it's studio meddling, because they were afraid that audiences wouldn't
We're gonna
understand.
get
it.
it. Yeah.
It's
Right.
hand holding, it's over explaining
Right.
things.
Yeah,
needlessly.
but I think this is a movie that both audiences caught up with what it was doing, but I think also just because it had been around in the culture long enough, you didn't need the narration anymore because we'd seen the movie already or we'd heard from other people about what the movie was about, so it made it easier to follow. Matt Singer had a really great piece on Screen Crush where he basically said, "Is this movie great?" And of course, people were like flipping out. How dare you question this? And the first sentence of the thing is like, "It's a good movie. I like it." Like he's not shitting on this film.
He's not trolling.
No, but he's
It's
just saying, "Is
thoughtful.
it great?" And I kind of am not entirely sure because I watched it again last night, and it's like, I mean, yeah, visually, this movie rewrote the cinema. We're still quoting this movie 35 years later. Dramatically, I kind of feel like it's very, this happens and this happens and this happens, boom, we're done. Like there's not a lot of stuff going on. I don't feel like the characters are as rich as they could be, although obviously if they're replicants, then maybe how are they gonna be rich because they don't have a background because it was implanted memories. Anyway, I think it's a very fine film. I don't know that it's great, but it's influential certainly, and I think that obviously the final cut is the best version of the ones I've
And
seen.
it seems great, much more so in retrospect because it is so influential, even for things that aren't very good. Like you look at Star Wars Episode 2, you look at
Right.
Coruscant and what that looks like, that's straight up Blade Runner.
Valerian has all that whole
Guardians of the
marketplace.
Galaxy,
Yeah.
Anyway, so
I think this movie is great.
see Blade Runner.
Right. I think the original is great. I think that the more that the final cut leans into the mystery as to whether or not Deckard is a replicant, I think that the more mystery there is, the better it makes the movie because different cuts follow different versions of that and make it more obvious or less obvious. So when there's more mystery, I think that makes this an excellent movie.
Undeniably great, Sean Young.
Yes.
And the clothes, of course.
Yes.
And the lighting,
design,
the lighting is amazing.
and Rutger
Shot
Hauer
by,
and-
what's his face, Cronenweth, who's
Jordan
Jeff Cronenweth's
Cronenweth.
dad. All right,
Yeah.
so yeah,
So
very
go see it if you
influential.
can. If you can see it on the IMAX screen, go see it.
All right, do you want to give?
the final cut?
Yeah.
Oh,
They're
that'd be
already
amazing.
showing it on
Do you want to
IMAX.
give
Really?
Blade Runner a
Oh, wow.
number?
Yeah, I give it a 9.8.
I'll say a 9. Yeah.
I will say an 8.8, and that I have no idea what that adds up to.
A lot.
But we're not going to go get.
But go see it.
We're going to get in our flying cars now and go home.
9.2.
Bye.